Hey, what's up, you guys? OldSchoolZerker here, and recently I had a very awesome discussion with a fellow YouTuber of mine, and he goes by the name of KayOhGaming. And the link to his channel will be down below in the description, and I'll also put an annotation on the screen to his channel. Definitely check them out. They make some really awesome Call of Duty and RuneScape videos. But basically, in this discussion, we talked about the implementation of God Wars Dungeon, and I was coming from the point of wanting God Wars Dungeon added, and he was coming from not wanting God Wars Dungeon added to old school RuneScape. And I felt like this discussion was very educational for me, at least. It'll definitely help me with my decision making as to whether or not I want God Wars Dungeon to be added whenever Jagex does eventually hold that content poll. And I really hope that this can help you guys also make a better decision as to whether or not you want God Wars Dungeon added into the game. And please leave this video a like and try and spread this around to your friends and anybody you know. It would be really awesome to see this video get noticed by a lot of people, because I felt like we definitely covered most of the big points for God Wars Dungeon, if not all of them. And so without further ado, please enjoy. Alright, so the first thing that we should talk about is definitely how God Wars will affect basically the PKing community as a whole, and how it will affect how people will fight in the wild, and how it will just affect fighting in general, PvP, I guess you could say, in the wild. And I guess starting off, a lot of people bitch about the rushing, it seems like. I've been hearing a lot of people making up how the AGS, specifically, the main weapon that's definitely the main weapon that everybody's worried about with God Wars Dungeon coming out, is definitely the Armadillo Godsword. And they're worried about people, this rushing community that I guess people said started up with God Wars Dungeon. And to me, that doesn't make much sense, because of, like I said in my video previously, I feel that there are 4 other weapons that can hit just as high and actually higher than the Armadillo Godsword, pretty much taking the whole prod spec thing and rushing thing, kind of like making it just sort of a bitching thing for when you die. Because obviously, if you've been PKing in the wild at this point in the game, Gmaul has definitely ruled the whole rushing community. Ancients and Gmaul is probably what people are most commonly seeing out there. And as we all know, the Gmaul, you can get like 4 hits like instantaneously right there, and very, very easily one hit KO someone. And same with the DDS, that has the potential to hit like 30s and even in the 40s if you have 99 strength and strength bonus and the whole shebang. And also with the dark bow, for any of the range tanks out there, the dark bow with dragon arrows can definitely hit some insane hits with the special attack. I've seen 40s and even in the 50s with a 40, and that's pretty much instant death right there, even with 99 hit points. And then obviously for any of the Barrows peers out there that will be using Darox, Darox is just an insane thing. Like I've said before, it's basically just having constant Armadillo Godsword special attack, because you obviously with the Armadillo Godsword, everybody acts like that almost every special attack you do with it is just an instant 70 with it, when if you've actually owned an Armadillo Godsword and tried to PK with it, you actually realize how, I don't want to say shit, but just how rare getting those insane prod specs actually is. And it seems like it happens to you very often, but if you actually own one, it really doesn't happen that often. And with Darox, you obviously have to have low hit points to hit high with that. And I've seen insane hits from even just half hit points. You can hit 40s and 50s if you're at half hit points. And then obviously if you take an even bigger risk and you risk it with like 10 hit points left, you have the potential to hit 60s and even 70s, depending on your hit points level. And so I really don't think that the Armadillo Godsword will affect PKing in a negative way. It's just another weapon that people will try and rush with, but it's nothing new to the game. It's not adding this new rushing community. And I'm not trying to discriminate against the other weapons, but obviously all the rest of the God Swords and the Saradomin Sword, just they're not really the best PKing weapons. Armadillo Godsword definitely trumps the rest of them. The rest of them are just for mainly training or Slayer, and they don't really do much. So that's pretty much my outlook on how God Wars will affect PKing as a whole. I don't think it'll affect it negatively at all, and that's pretty much how I feel about it.
All right, right on. Well, I come from it more from a perspective. I do agree that the whole rushing part. I think that it is going to open up the ability for people to rush easier, but I can get to that point later. I think the biggest point that needs to be said is that this is going to change because that there are 70 requirements and 75. It's going to change the way that people are going to be training their accounts. And so I think having the 70 requirement is going to change drastically the way that Melee is set up. People are no longer necessarily going to be deciding 60 or 70 on Whip or DDS, and I think that's a big change. Another thing is that it intrinsically is melee-based, the God of War Dungeon update, and the reason for that is there's not much magic and range gear to make up for the added melee gear. It's mostly melee that comes out of God Wars Dungeon, and the magic stuff and the range stuff is somewhat trivial. It doesn't really matter much, and so I think letting God Wars Dungeon come into the game is sort of allowing the game to become more melee focused and not as much balanced as it was back in the day when we remember it. And so I think that the focus on the AGS and the idea that it requires 70 attack are huge points to be made. Going back to what you said about the specs, though, I think it is still to the point where an AGS will definitely hit more often and harder than most DDS specs. And the reason I say that is because although someone right now can, for instance, stay at 60 attack and get their strength 10 levels higher, when we get to the point where we're all maxed, it's going to be a huge difference between a 99 strength DDS and a 99 strength AGS. And those specs are going to be huge. The last point that I'd really want to make is that the whole idea, a lot of people don't like RuneScape for the simple fact that the rich tend to get richer. And that's a philosophy that tends to go on a lot in RuneScape. If you have money, you can make money really easily, and that's the way that it tends to go in this game. And I think that adding God Wars Dungeon increases the rich getting richer and the poor staying poor. And the main reason for that is that the AGS is going to be everyone, pure, non-pure. It's going to be the weapon to have. And if you don't have the amount of money to be able to get there, you're not fighting fair fights in the wilderness. You're going to be having to deal with a lot of people whipping out AGS when all you have is a Gmaul or a DDS. And although I do agree that those are still powerful weapons, it's hard to say that in a fair fight with fair stats that the AGS is going to be taken down by the DDS. Obviously, it could happen, but that's in a very different. It's much more rare than you would think. So I think adding the AGS, it's not as much for the rushing. I mean, rushing is huge as it is right now. A dark bow could destroy anyone. A Gmaul, I've been rushed by Gmaul several times. So it's not as much rushing that I come into. It's being able to be out there and having your spec weapon as an AGS because you have enough money. Whereas for someone else, bringing an AGS in the wilderness is the worst. That could be their entire bank gone right there. So those are my main arguments for why we should sort of keep the AGS out of the game. So I wanted to hear what you had to say about those specific points.
I definitely do agree with your whole concept about the rich getting richer, whole philosophy. That's pretty much been the case with the game. I'd say way back in the day, and it is kind of unfair that someone with a bigger bank than someone else that maybe has like 1 to 2 mil PKing in the wild. Obviously, they're gonna have a little bit more of an advantage with the Armadillo Godsword because the stats are definitely better in the sense on paper compared to the DDS. Obviously, the strength bonus is higher, and I believe it uses Crush, so obviously the Crush bonus is higher, and the fights won't be as fair, but I think that's kind of like more for a Pure's stance. Basically, anybody below 40 defense, because once you bring Vengeance into the game from the Lunar Spellbook, I think that definitely kind of changes the whole game up. Without Vengeance, I definitely agree that the AGS will be the dominant weapon in the fight, but you got to think that if you're fighting a main, obviously if your 40 defense are higher, because 40 defense is what's required for lunar diplomacy, so that's as low as you can possibly go. And then if you bring Vengeance into the game, it's very possible to kill somebody with any weapon, really. Vengeance is, I think, what pretty much determines the outcome of the whole fight, and the AGS can combo really good with that, but a whip can as well, D-skim can, the barrel chest anchor even can combo with Vengeance very well, and that weapon's already in the game, and I believe that is the second strongest weapon in the game right now. I'm not exactly sure what the first one is. I'm guessing it might be the Dorok's Great Axe, but I feel like Vengeance kind of helps even out the fights if someone is using a DDS compared to a Armadillo Godsword, because with an Armadillo Godsword fighting someone with Vengeance, hitting high can be very crucial to a normal pure fight, someone that's only using Ring of Recoil to get recoil hits, but being able to hit high, get those random high hits even without using a special attack, you could hit 40s and even 50s, can actually be very deadly to you, and I feel like can lead to the downfall for someone that's specifically solely using the AGS in a fight. If you actually have Vengeance, then if they do get a high hit on you, then you can have the chance to combo them out very easily. And I feel that kind of, with Vengeance, it kind of evens out the, I guess, strength, I could say, of the AGS. And that's pretty much how I feel about your points.
Right. Well, I think the biggest thing is that the AGS in combination with Vengeance, I think, is almost a bit worse in the fact that when you think of all the top spec weapons right now, Gmaul, DDS, and Debo, those are all spec weapons that hit multiple splats of damage and not a single splat. And the AGS spec as a single splat is going to combo with that Vengeance in a very deadly manner. And so while I agree that obviously Zerkers need a way of hitting each other down and KOing each other, they can't just hope that their whip is going to take each other all the way down. I think that it sort of adds into the whole, when RuneScape started becoming overpowered weapons and started having things that didn't necessarily belong in the game, in the sense that when you had 2007 Scape, the game was very much balanced. We had the dark bow added, which was a huge thing. I would say without the dark bow, I would think that range is a little underemphasized. But I think as the game is right now, it's at a pretty perfect balance where it would be tough deciding which weapons to bring out there in the wilderness. And there's no strictly dominant force. Whereas once you allow the God Wars dungeon back, there's the automatic AGS is going in my inventory if you're rich enough. And I think that's something we should stay away from. I mean, a lot of people think that this argument is a lot based on, I want more variety. I'm bored of seeing all these PKing videos with just DDS and Gmaul. Well, first of all, you're adding only one other weapon, and what's going to end up happening is you're not going to have all the video makers making a bunch of different weapons, trying different stuff out. This one with a DDS, this one with a Gmaul, maybe another with a dark bow. You're going to have people going out there with their AGS because that's what works. And I think that it's important to look back on RuneScape history and notice that when the God Wars dungeon came out, that's pretty much what happened. It was no longer a fight of our weapons are somewhat similar in power. A ranger and a melee can go at it, and it's really hard to tell who's going to win by the end. And I think God Wars Dungeon sort of enters that whole thing. I mean, on my range tank specifically, I'm leveling a range tank, and I think I'm mostly deciding on what range weapon I'm going to use to spec people out. Am I going to use Dragonstone Bolts Enchanted? Am I going to use the Dark Bow and spec them out with that? But it feels like when the God Wars Dungeon comes out, I almost feel forced to go for the AGS because I feel like I'm going to have enough money at that point. And it's really going to be hard to think that, my dark bow is going to be a much more reliable weapon than the AGS, because the AGS time and time again just proves to be, really accurate because you have those extra attack levels, high strength bonus. And that's really the thing that I want to stay away from. I mean, I don't think that someone who's hybriding right now can really decide what the best spec weapon is. It really depends on a wide variety of things. And I think with the AGS, you're just really limiting it down to that smaller point. So with that said, I just wanted to say that I think right now the barrel chest anchor is the highest damage weapon. So I think you're correct with that. And the whole thing with switching to these other somewhat overpowered weapons, they all have extreme cons to them that I don't think the AGS has, such as being extremely slow. I mean, all these weapons, barrel chest anchor, dark bow, these are all extremely slow weapons. And while the AGS is pretty slow, it's not as slow as those. And I think they all have enough cons, and I think RuneScape had more of a grasp on their development side, where they were dealing with balance issues, making sure that things weren't too overpowered. And it feels to me and a lot of other people who played the game that they sort of lost it right around the time when God War's Dungeon came out, a little bit later Dragon Claws, and so on and so forth. So I think it's important that we stay away from those overpowered weapons.
Well, mainly getting into the range topic that I kind of ignored, and I didn't mean to. Basically, range and mage has kind of always been an underpowered sort of way to fight in RuneScape, pretty much for most of the time, up until about, I don't know, pre-EOC maybe, is when they started adding more range and mage options. And I do agree that with the implementation of God War's Dungeon, there really isn't that many benefits to range and mage. I don't really even know. I can't think of any off the top of my head for mage, and really the only thing from Armadillo for range is the armor itself, and right now that's really the only range thing I can think about. So I do agree with you there that it seems like melee is pretty much the dominating combat style in the wild and pretty much all of RuneScape, but that is pretty much just how the game actually was. I guess they could try and add some stuff a little bit later down the road, but that would probably ruin the whole old school RuneScape feel, and I think they should probably stay away from that. And now moving on with the AGS, I do, in one sense, I feel like with your whole pros and cons thing to all the really strong weapons such as the dark bow and the barrel chest anchor, how they're very, very slow weapons. Obviously, if they did add God War's Dungeon, well, I guess not obviously, but I'm assuming if they did add that, they would have to create it from scratch, which means that they could potentially tweak the weapons a little bit. And I don't know if they'll do this or not. It's just a suggestion. And one thing that I've always felt was kind of wrong about the AGS that I feel is a little bit overpowered in a sense is how it has two special attacks, and the Bandos God Sword I believe only has one spec. I'm not sure about the Saradomin or Zamorak ones. Those I never used those, so I'm not exactly sure. I think the Saradomin might have two, but I think they should change the Armadillo Godsword to have only one special attack. I feel like if you use it, it should use up 100% of the special attack bar. It just makes sense with how high you can hit with it, and I feel like that would kind of help with the balancing issues a little bit more. And I don't know, the way how you said the development team kind of went away from keeping the game balanced, I can kind of understand that. The armor such as Bandos, I guess we kind of never really talked about that. That because people would be fighting with that in the wild too. If they were like a Barrows Pure, they might be going out there and not sculling with that. And Bandos is, with the implementation of Bandos, it does add the only leg in the game that gives a strength bonus, but it only gives a +2 strength bonus. So at max, it might raise your max hit by 1. I don't even think it does that. I think you might need 3 or 4 to raise your max hit, and people will be fighting out there unscald, and with Bandos, because they're obviously not going to be risking their Bandos, which is going to be worth probably 50 mil plus at the beginning of the release of God Wars Dungeon, and I don't think Bandos armor is very overpowered in a sense that Barrow's armor still has a higher defense bonus, and if you're a Zerker or if you're out there fighting with Void, such as yourself being a range tank, you're not really risking that much that people could pick up. So if you fight anybody in Darox or Bandos, they're more than likely not going to skull on you if they have some common sense, unless you have some sort of risk in your inventory that would try and persuade them to skull on you. And so I don't think Bandos is very overpowered, considering that it doesn't have any higher of a defense bonus than Darox, and Darox's special ability is very, very deadly, as we all know. I'm sure we've all been KO'd by Darox, and that's pretty much my thoughts on that.
Yeah, for the Bandos armor thing, I somewhat agree with you, and I completely agree that it's not overpowered at all. And the reason why, one of the few arguments that makes me think that God Wars Dungeon somewhat should be implemented is allowing for the better armors. But really, when you think about it, the only reason you would really need better armors is for better bosses. And as it is right now, you can kill any boss in almost any armor, which I'm sure is part of your argument that it's not very good that all the bosses are extremely easy to kill right now. But I don't think that Bandos armor, I mean, in PKing in general, it's going to be really tough to find the people that are going out there with Bandos and not sculling. Maybe in the first couple weeks of implementation, there's going to be people attacking people with Bandos just for fun to say that they attack someone with Bandos. But at a certain point, it's going to get to the point where it was back in old RuneScape, where you could realize that they're not risking anything and sort of talk them down from not sculling. So I don't really have too much of a problem with the armor specifically, especially considering that not that many people I acknowledge are going past 45 defense. I think most of this game right now is a 1 defense and 45 defense game. There's a little bit of range tanks, a little bit of Barrow's Pures, and a few mains, mostly Video Maker mains. And that's really kind of all we have. It's mostly, and I'm wondering if you agree, it's mostly a PKing community, and it's mostly sort of a low defense PKing community, meaning that the high-end PVM content really doesn't have as much as a player base as the normal game would if they were implementing higher-end PVM content when you were doing in the live game. Obviously, there'd be a much bigger response from the live game, seeing that most of the PVMers remain over in the live game. And so I think having the low defense game that we have basically right now really feeds into this whole AGS being overpowered, because that weapon hitting on low defense can destroy, and anyone out there, with Bandos armor, and even if their melee stats are a little lower to compensate, if you're fighting a guy in Bandos armor as a Zerker pure, you're going to have a tough time bringing that guy down, and he's going to be hitting you consistently and pretty hard. So I think that it's not a very good idea on that basis to bring God Wars in for, the armors too even. The last thing I'd like to say is that I think Saradomin's sword, not Saradomin God's sword, but Saradomin's sword, is obviously one of the best. I think it would be the best strength training weapon once it came into the game, because obviously a whip can't train strength effectively. And so that's another thing that I think we should maybe touch on is, do you think that it's acceptable to bring something into the game that would increase the strength training experience per hour? Because it's sort of at the point now where people have decided what they're going to do in the long run for their training. If they're getting 99 strength, they've decided what they're going to do. And implementing God Wars Dungeon would drastically change the way people look at that. So I'm wondering, do you think implementing a higher strength training weapon would be a good idea.
Basically, starting off with your first point about how it's a very low defense community, I do agree that it does seem like a very big majority of this game right now is mainly concerned about PKing, and they're either 1 defense or 20 defense being an initiate pure, or 45 defense, and not very many people are going that much higher. There is a few more Barrows Pures that are staying 70 defense, maybe a few more going to 75 defense, obviously for the Dragonfire Shield. But as for actual people that are going for max domains right now, being obviously all 99 melee stats and the rest of combat stats, that's a very small percentage right now, I would definitely say. And with the implementation of God Wars Dungeon, it would definitely convince people to try and go towards that maxed main account, because right now, being a Zerker pure, like you said about with the whole implementation of new armor needing basically is for fighting harder bosses. Like you said, right now that all the bosses are definitely easy, and I definitely agree with that. Even a Zerker pure with rune armor and a rune defender, the typical Zerker pure outfit could easily go in if they had high enough whatever stat would be needed, range, mage, or melee, could easily go in and kill bosses such as DKs. Well, maybe not DKs, but you can't. It is possible to go do it as a Zerker, and it just seems kind of like the bosses are almost a little underpowered if it is even possible to do as a Zerker pure. Bosses, should be a challenge, and that's what I think God Wars Dungeon definitely brings to the game, as more of a challenge for the PVM people out there for fighting bosses. And I definitely think that's one reason why they should come in, is because it does allow for higher level PVM content, and it's more bosses to fight, more variety, and yeah. So what was your last point? I can't remember.
No, I'm trying to remember. Well, we can go back to maybe I'll think about it, but we can start talking about the higher level PVM content point. But here's just a quick question. I mean, so as of right now, the armors that exist are perfectly sufficient to kill all the bosses in the game. When you implement God Wars Dungeon, obviously it's going to be pretty hard at the beginning, right? It's going to take 5-man teams probably to be able to take bosses down efficiently. But we're going to get to the point where, this game is very new, and by the time God Wars gets released, you're going to have a lot of people who, especially the mains, are going to be somewhat maxed. And when they change from going to having the armors that are in the game right now to having the God Wars Dungeon armors, that's going to be a pretty drastic change. And my question to you is, wouldn't that change it just to back how the game is right now? Because I mean, once you have a team full of people with Armadillo armor and you're fighting Armadillo, that's not much of a challenge, even in pre-EOC. So that was my question. Wouldn't it sort of just continue the problem further down the road?
Basically, like I've said before, the Armadillo armor and Bandos armor, I don't feel is that much of a change. They're not really that much better armors. Like Armadillo range armor it does have a little bit more defense, but it still is range armor, so it's kind of low. And with the actual range bonus that it gives, Black D'hide is pretty damn close to the range attack bonus for Armadillo. I can't exactly remember it off the top of my head, but I do remember Black D'hide being pretty close to Armadillo armor. So I feel, in a sense of fighting Armadillo, it's still going to be a challenge if basically saying that they stop right at God Wars Dungeon and don't release anything else. Obviously, the bosses will always be a challenge because they added so much more stuff that helped with bossing. Just because people have Bandos armor doesn't mean that they're going to be able to take down a boss that much quicker, because I think a lot of people almost mistake the strength bonus for being able to hit more consistently, and that's obviously not the case for the people that do know. You obviously need an attack bonus to hit more consistently, and a lot of people think that just because you have this extra 6 strength bonus, I believe, with the Bandos top and bottom, that you're just going to be all of a sudden overpowered and being able to take down any boss easily, and that's not really the case. All you're really going to be able to do is hit like 1 or 2 max hits higher than what your normal max hit was, and obviously since Torags and basically the Barrows armors, Torags, Daroks, have higher defense, that means that those will still be the more efficient armors to use for bossing, just because you're going to be able to tank a lot more hits from all the bosses in general. And I don't feel that Bandos and Armadillo armor will ruin it in that sense. And basically some of the stuff that would help with bossing that we're going to be without is probably the biggest one is summoning, and that's not in the game right now. And trying to do God Wars Dungeon without any summoning creatures is definitely a very big challenge. And I think even with a full team of people that have the Armadillo chestplate and possibly the legs, I think people would still be using the Varrock's plate skirt in combination with that for the defense bonus and the prayer bonus. I think without things such as summoning, it's still going to be a really big challenge, and you're going to have to go in there even with people with full Bandos or full Armadillo. You're going to still have to have at least 4 people if you're wanting to make your trip actually worth your while and actually be able to stay there for a while. And summoning is just one of the few things that made PVMing easier, and I really don't think the armors actually change it that much in a sense of taking down bosses.
Okay. Yeah, I think to add to your point, I think another thing that we'd be missing is flasks, and I think flasks are a huge game changer when it comes to PVM, just because obviously you have more doses of potion, but I still think that it's not necessarily, I mean, in a perfect world, once let's say we get God Wars Dungeon, and it gets to the point a couple years down the road, and God Wars Dungeon's the highest update we have, you're going to basically have the high-level people, the high-level mains, and they're going to be grinding God Wars for the AGSs of the low-defense PKing community. And I think that prospect is a little silly to begin with, because as of right now, for instance, when Barrows was, let's say it gets to a better moneymaker. Right now, I'd say Barrows is a somewhat subpar moneymaker simply because of the amount of cost of prayer potions. But let's say it gets to the point where it's actually a good moneymaker, and Guthan Spears, the chance of getting that with the amount of prayer potions he uses is actually pretty good. Any account that you want to PK on, and considering that this is a mostly PKing community, you don't want to force people to having more than one account. And as of right now, I can go on my 1 defense pure and do Barrows. Probably can't do DKs. That's a little unrealistic. But I could definitely do Barrows, and I could do a couple other things. Although there isn't much else besides KQ. But that's the sort of thing where even if you're a low defense pure, you can still do most of the PVM that exists right now. And creating God Wars Dungeon, that's almost explicitly you can go there with 45 defense, but it's suggested it's a bit higher. And it's endgame content for the small minority that is the endgame players in this server. So I think it's kind of a bad thing to have a setup where you have a very low amount of high-level players who are going to have to get all of the AGSs for all of the pures, because they're all going to be wanting it. You're basically going to have a situation where everyone is going to look at going for high defense, because that's where the real money is going to be. The people that are farming AGSs, imagine the money that would come from that. You're one of only, I don't know, let's be conservative, 5,000 people that could do God Wars Dungeon efficiently. You're going to be making some serious money. And I think another point to consider when we're talking about higher level PVM content is that a lot of these God Wars bosses, you're not even using the God Wars items to kill them. And I agree with what you said, where a lot of people would be still using Varrock's chain skirt. A lot of people would still be using, garbs of subjugation aren't necessarily the best thing either. A lot of people would still be using items that aren't from God Wars Dungeon when they're doing it. So it almost begs the question of whether or not it's even permissible, because you have the point where it's almost only affecting PvP. The weapons that are implemented, who goes to bosses, let's say KQ, and just sits there with an AGS and uses an AGS to kill it? No, you use a whip. You use better weapons than God Wars weapons. And so in effect, it's almost a PvP update for PVMers, if you get what I'm saying. And I think that's sort of an unsustainable route to take, because it's going to force either people to look at creating higher level accounts to try to get the money from getting AGSs. And it's going to make people, either ruin their pures or invest, even more time into this game that they may not have otherwise invested if they weren't trying to, because everyone wants to be the best. No one's going out there like, oh, well, I'm kind of okay with being mediocre. Everyone's trying to be the best. And so when you're implementing new things into the game, it's completely changing the way that everyone has been planning their 2007 experience. And so I think it's not a very good idea on that basis for allowing it just for PVM. And while I acknowledge that the bosses are obviously going to be harder, there's no way that the God Wars dungeon bosses are going to be anywhere close to as easy as DKs or KQ. But is that really worth risking for the sake of the rest of the game? Because the problems I just laid out, I think are some of the biggest when it comes to the entire community as a whole. You're going to have an economy that the high-level weapons are going to be, the supply and demand is going to be crazy. There's going to be very little supply based on how many people are low defense in this game. There's going to be a huge amount of demand because one defense pures, initiate pures, Zerker pures, name your pure, AGS is the best. And when you consider that, it's really hard to wrap my head around why we would allow those high-level players to have such an advantage from that one category. So although they might be somewhat bored, I guess, with the PVM that exists now, there's still somewhat of a variety. And to say that we need God Wars Dungeon to create more variety, it's a slippery slope, because what happens in 2 years when God Wars Dungeon starts being on farm? I mean, it's RuneScape experience that when stuff is first released, it's hard. We have a hard time killing it. We don't know quite what's going to happen, although that's probably not going to happen with God Wars, because if they implement it in the same way, we're going to know all the tricks as before. So we're not going to have that experience of having to learn a new update. And so I think that it's very realistic to think that in a few years after God Wars Dungeon, people are going to be asking for the next thing, because they're going to have mastered God Wars Dungeon, maybe not soloing, but it definitely duoing. And it's going to get to the point where give me the next thing. And we're just going down this slippery slope of no longer having 2007-scape as 2007-scape. It then becomes pre-EOC-scape. And that's really a difference that I wonder how much of the community would accept. How many people think that because we voted for 2007, and I'm somewhat partial to this opinion, because we voted for 2007, it explicitly said August 10th, 2007, look up what was in the game and vote based on that. When we start changing that, you create pretty big problems in the ways that people were planning on creating their account. And you could even change the opinions of many people that voted. Maybe people wouldn't have voted if there was going to be God Wars Dungeon in this game. They thought, oh, well, that's when RuneScape went to shit. I don't like it then. And I wouldn't vote if God Wars Dungeon was implemented. I've talked to a lot of people, and although just going around RuneScape, you could find a lot of people saying a lot of different things. But there's a lot of people that seem to think along those lines, where if God Wars Dungeon is implemented, they're no longer going to find enjoyment in this game. And while that may not necessarily be completely true for everyone, it does sort of call into question the ability of their vote to have actual power, because Because what did they vote for if we start changing from August 10th, 2007? What exactly did they vote for in that case? So those are my main problems with the high-level PVM content change.
So getting on with your first thing you said there, how mains will be the only ones really farming God Wars Dungeon, and how it shouldn't force people to make multiple accounts. I guess that's something you kind of had to, I guess, accept when you decided to make a certain type of pure in the game, because Jagex obviously never made this game. Even from the beginning, they never expected people to, or they never wanted people, I guess, to make a certain type of pure account. They never intended on anybody ever staying 1 defense or 45 defense or any certain type of, I guess, stat build, I guess I should say, for specifically PvP. They originally just wanted everybody to just try and train everything as high as they can, and not, they wanted everybody to be able to have access to everything in the game. And I guess with making a Zerker pure or 1 defense pure, basically, I guess I should say a lower defense pure, because Barrows pures and range tanks such as yourself will definitely be able to do God Wars Dungeon. I guess it's just kind of the price that you have to pay with making a pure. I mean, everybody knew coming into this game, even without God Wars Dungeon, that making a pure, it's you're gonna have a tougher time doing Slayer. You're gonna have a tougher time doing bosses such as KQ, DKs, and even like the giant mole underground Falador Park. It's gonna be tougher for you, and so I feel like adding God Wars Dungeon, it's not giving mains any more of an advantage than they already have on the pures with fighting the bosses. The KQ is really tough right now, and you definitely need to have high hit points and high defense for that. Even all the top tiered mains are having a pretty tough time. From some of the streams and videos I watched, they're having a very tough time staying alive at KQ. So I don't feel like adding God Wars Dungeon to the game is going to give mains any more of an advantage in that sense. And going on to what you said about how the AGS is mainly just going to be a PKing based weapon, and that's sort of true in a sense, because I mean, it's just the way that special attack works is it basically increases your max hit. I'm not exactly sure about the exact percentage. 100, I don't know. I'm not even going to say a number, but it basically, the special effect of that special attack is it does increase your max hit, which that definitely does cater more towards PKing, but you also have to think about the other god swords too, such as the Saradomin god sword, which the special attack, I know it revives your prayer points, and I think it actually heals you as well, depending on what you hit. And people will actually be using the AGS at things such as DK. I don't know anything about DK, so I'm not even going to talk about that. But Calfight Queen, people do go in there. They actually use full Varix as the way to go. So there's really no. That's just the best for KQ is full Varix, and they're really not going to use anything else. But the AGS can serve. It can very well help for PVM, because people usually do bring a special attack weapon when going to the KQ. DDS is probably the most popular. DDS and D-Mace is usually what I see when going to the Calfight Queen. But then having the AGS can allow those people to hit very, very high on the KQ, and it could be another thing to help towards killing that boss monster faster while wasting less supplies while trying to kill that boss. And also about how you were talking about a couple years down the road, people will be getting bored of God Wars Dungeon, and they'll be asking for the next big update. I guess with coming into old school RuneScape, people didn't really think about this, but even if we don't add God Wars Dungeon, people a couple years down the road are going to be asking for new content, and they're either going to vote for it or it's just not going to be added, and people will be running away. And I think that's potentially the downfall to old school RuneScape as a whole, is that with staying at a certain time period, it is going to get boring. I don't want to say very fast, but within a year or two, people will be getting bored of the content in the game. It's just going to be the same. People getting maxed out. There will be a vast amount of, a lot bigger amount of D-chains in the game. Whatever else bosses drop, such as the Berserker rings. That's pretty much how EOC turned out, is just without a way of taking out certain items such as the D-chain, they're just going to be stacking up, and obviously the prices of them is going to be getting dropped, and eventually the economy will get ruined in old school, just like EOC. Probably not near as quick, since they took gambling out, which is a very awesome thing, and that definitely increased the lifespan of old school RuneScape, which I'm yes, applause. I'm very happy for that. So that's definitely saved old school RuneScape and made its life definitely a lot longer in that sense. But it's inevitable that it's going to happen with or without God Wars Dungeon. People will be getting bored of the game if we are staying in a certain time period, and that's pretty much, it's bad to say, and I don't want to say it, but that's pretty much the inevitable downfall of old school RuneScape. Same with RuneScape Classic. There's maybe like 100 to 200 people on those servers at a time, possibly less now. It's been a while since I checked, and it's simply because they haven't added anything, and the game is very, very outdated, and it's a very tedious game to play. But with the implementation of God Wars Dungeon, it can add that extra entertainment value for the game. And I'm not one that's saying that they need to add God Wars Dungeon within the next month. I don't care when they add it, to be honest. I really think that they should add it at some point. I feel the best time to add God Wars Dungeon into the game is about the time when they notice that people are getting really bored of the bosses, and the economy is just starting, like the amount of dragon chain bodies and berserker rings and dragon full, well, I'm not even going to say dragon full homes because those will never be in an abundance, but I think that's when they should add God Wars Dungeon. Maybe like 6 months to a year down the road, maybe later, depending on how this game goes out, because since there are very little amount of mains, that means that, you know, peers will be able to do bosses, and peers will get D-chain drops and Zerker ring drops and so on and so forth, but it's going to be at a very, very slow rate compared to the mains, since they are going to be able to tank out more of the hits. They're going to be able to use better armor, better weapons, and they're going to be bringing in more items than the peers are. So that's just how I feel God Wars Dungeon should be implemented, if it is implemented. Basically 6 months to a year down the road. I do agree that adding it right now within the next month or two would make the game more boring, but as of right now, there's just not very many people that would be able to do God Wars Dungeon, so it probably would take another month or two for the people to get their accounts to a status that God Wars Dungeon becomes efficient for them, I guess I should say. And so with implementation of God Wars Dungeon, they should wait a little while before they do implement it.
Okay. Well, I'm really glad to hear you say that last part. So going back to the part where you said it was something I had to accept as a pure, as to whether or not there was certain PVM content, endgame content that I could do. I actually completely agree with you, and that's my main argument. I made a video on the second poll, and on that I voted against peers being able to return to Apatol, and I had a lot of people yell at me for that. And, you know, oh, I made my pure and I completed the quest on accident and I couldn't get the experience, or I couldn't, I had too high defense, or, I completed the quest, I didn't get the defense, but now I can't return to Apatol and I wanted to get range. This is why I agree with you, is that allowing peers to return to Apatol and get the Addy gloves and all that stuff, that is not something that we had to consider when we created peers when this game came out. I knew that I could not chin range if I completed Monkey Madness, and that was a calculated decision I made to do Monkey Madness on my pure. Basically weighing out, do I want to train melee with a D skim or a D long, and be able to chin range or not? And so I completely agree that we have to make calculated decisions when this game came out, as to whether or not our stats would be at certain levels for certain content. And that's sort of part of my argument as to why we shouldn't necessarily bring out God Wars, is that when we were all creating our accounts, planning our accounts, and now it's at the point where I don't know anyone who doesn't have their account planned out, at least one of their accounts. And so all of these plans could go to naught if we decide to implement God Wars Dungeon, because it's at the point where that's such a game-changing implement that there's going to be so many people wondering, well, okay, do I get the stats to do that now? Is it worth it? Am I going to ruin my PKing experience because I want to be able to do God Wars as well? There's so many questions that arise, and I think it's better to sort of stay in the situation where, okay, I'm very comfortable with my account. I knew what I was going into when I started it, and I've planned it very carefully, because I think that's my favorite part about this game. I don't know about you, but it's the fact that every single tiny decision counts when you get down to trying to PK as the perfect PKer. There's very small decisions. You hit someone once with defensive on, you're 2 defense, and to some people that they sort of consider their account ruined after that. And it's those tiny decisions that I really enjoy about this game. And with the implementation of a lot of new content, and God Wars Dungeon alone may not do this, but you're changing it up so much that people are at the point where, okay, well, now is it worth getting this? Oh, well, I had calculated this before, but there's a better choice now. And these are questions that I think we should sort of avoid, and implementing God Wars Dungeon would not be a very good thing to do that. Now, when you said that items will stack up before we implement God Wars Dungeon, there's going to be a lot of D-chains, a lot of whips. I completely agree, and it's going to get to the point, obviously, where whips are much cheaper. But the thing is that, I mean, the same thing would apply to God Wars Dungeon. It's going to get to the point where items will stack, and it'll be to the point where AGS is currently worthless. And while I understand that that's not a very good argument, just pushing it back, I think that the item stacking up obviously is a natural part of RuneScape, and no matter what we implement, that's not really going to change to a drastic degree. I mean, really what you have is whether items stack up or whether items become worthless. And you have a situation in the EOC where there is a lot of whips in the game. That used to be a very valuable item, but now whips don't really have their place. There's Drygore weapons. Why would you use a friggin' whip? So it's at the point where old content becomes meaningless, purposeless. And I think that would definitely be the case. I mean, consider Carol's armor. Carol's armor is going to go completely down. There's going to be no reason to use Carol's armor. Armadillo is a much better choice. And those are the sort of things where I think the gear stacking argument, while I completely agree that RuneScape inevitably is going to have items stacking, it's really, if you decide that, oh, well, this item's stacking too much, we need a new one, you're just making the item that was stacked completely meaningless and purposeless. And so I don't think that's necessarily the best route to go, because obviously that's why RuneScape is what it is. It's a game with updates, in the live game at least, and because they don't want to have a point where it's completely stagnant and items aren't getting replaced and refreshed. But in 2007-scape, a lot of people consider this game a place where they can go and PK. And that's sort of it. It's no longer, the live game has a huge association with trying to max out and trying to get to the very end and all this, where I feel like a lot of 2007 players are perfectly content getting their characters to a high enough level to PK and then essentially only logging in to PK. And if you have a situation where you're starting to release updates, there's going to be more and more stuff to do for those people that are simply just trying to get the best account, stay there, and then you can have an account to play on, PK on for years to come. And implementing updates is really gonna change that. Now, this is getting to the point where I completely agree with you on the people getting bored. Now, obviously, it's going to get to the point a couple years down the road where borrows, KQ, DKs, all going to be really, really boring. You're going to have done it hundreds of times in the past couple years, and it's going to get really boring. The thing is, though, is implementing God Wars Dungeon really the antidote for that? Because here's sort of a question geared towards you, because this is really my last point, is with God Wars Dungeon, you're implementing essentially old technology. I mean, most of the people that played this game remember God Wars Dungeon. We all played it when pre-EOC. We all did all the bosses. And we sort of understand completely how to do God Wars Dungeon. We know all the bosses. And it's at the point where, is that even really going to make us not bored? I almost feel like within maybe the first couple weeks, maybe the first AGS drop, I'll be really excited. And it'll get to the point where, okay, well, I've did this 4 years ago for quite a while, so I'm pretty bored at this point. So my question to you is, it seems to me that your biggest argument for God Wars Dungeon, and I somewhat agree, is that PVM needs to be a bigger challenge. So I was wondering, is it God Wars Dungeon really that you want, or is it a higher challenge for PVM? So basically my question is, couldn't they just as easily, if we were to really challenge them, couldn't they come up with a new sort of God Wars Dungeon, in the sense that maybe they make sure that no weapons or gear come out of it? It's almost like a mini game. You'll go into it and the gear that you get from drops will only be able to be used against those bosses. You can't bring it into the wilderness. And that would create a higher level PVM content that those PVMers want, without having the chance of ruining the game for everyone else. And so is it God Wars Dungeon that you want, or could that sort of implementation be a better idea?
Answering your question, I definitely think it's God Wars Dungeon that I want, because obviously I don't have a problem with the AGS and any of the armors or weapons in that, and I feel that God Wars Dungeon it has that nostalgic feel that we're all playing old school RuneScape for right now. Really, there's not many people right now that are playing old school RuneScape that didn't play back in 2007, when this was actually how RuneScape was. There might be a few people that are experiencing it for the first time, that have joined since like 2009 or later. I know there's been a lot of new people to come into RuneScape, and I really think God Wars Dungeon should be added, just simply for that nostalgic feel, and it does help the PVMers. Now, with adding a new minigame and a completely whole new thing, I wouldn't be opposed to that, but again, well, I guess not again. I guess I should say that I'm not exactly sure how much time and money Jagex is willing to invest into old school RuneScape, because I know right now they do have a lot of pride in their EOC game, and they're definitely putting all their main focus in their company into that game, and to go through and make something that they've never made before to put into old school RuneScape and potentially not into EOC, I'm not exactly sure if they would be willing to put that time and effort into old school RuneScape. They're going to be making a more major decision. It's probably going to be about, I think it's 5 months from now. They said when old school came out, about 6 months down the road after it gets released, they'll pretty much make a final big decision on whether or not they're going to have free-to-play servers that actual people that don't have to pay membership will be able to play down the road, and whether or not they're going to be keeping as big of a support team working on old school RuneScape, whether they're going to be adding more, and whether or not they're going to be taking it away. It all just really depends on how big old school RuneScape gets, and if it isn't just sort of a simple fad, I guess I should say, with RuneScape, because everybody likes the nostalgic feel, and I guess we just got to kind of see whether or not jagex wants to continue working hard on it, and I definitely wouldn't be opposed into adding new content such as that. And with old school RuneScape, my mentality in it is almost not just to have the same exact game as back in 2007. The mentality that I'm kind of having more towards old school RuneScape is to almost, I guess I should say, tweak the game into the perfect game that we all wanted, and since we as a community are actually are being the determining factor on whether or not content is being added into RuneScape, we can add new content at our own will, whether we choose that we like them or not. It doesn't just have to be God Wars Dungeon. It could be any of the updates that have been added to EOC, that the very few updates that I see were good from jagex, we could actually add into the game. And they've already been doing that, such as the one-click bank option, simple stuff such as that wasn't into the game. So it's not just that I want an actual 2007 experience. I just want to create that perfect 2007 RuneScape that we all wanted, but jagex just didn't listen to us, and they added whatever their hearts desired. And I feel with God Wars Dungeon, that could add towards that perfect RuneScape that I wanted. Obviously, I've went over all my main points as to why I want God Wars Dungeon added with the PVM, the PKing concept. I feel like it would make PKing more fun. It adds a little bit more variety to weapons. And I guess kind of backtracking here a while ago, back to when you said the PK video makers will only be using the AGS. I don't think that'll really be the case. They'll probably use it right when it first comes out. Same with any new thing that comes out in the RuneScape, such as like Turmoil. People were using that, and then Dragon Claws, and people use those for a while, but then later on down the road, people will, I guess, sort of to entertain themselves and give entertainment to their viewers, they're going to be adding handicaps to themselves rather than just be using the same AGS or DDS, Gmaul, Darkbow spec weapons. They're going to actually put handicaps on themselves and use weapons such as what's ones maybe like the Dragon Woodcutting Axe. That's a really random weapon to use, and that one has a special attack, and they could just go out and try and KO someone with that. They could go out and try and KO someone with a bronze weapon just to kind of sort of handicap themselves. And I feel like that, as a viewer for most of those PK videos, I feel like watching people that are handicapping themselves in PKing is a lot more interesting and funny to watch people die to such shitty weapons in the wild compared to the AGS. And I feel like the AGS will be, obviously, it'll be the dominant weapon for a while for the people that can afford it. And that kind of goes into the next thing I wanted to get into, is how, going into the whole item stacking thing, how you said that basically at the beginning of this whole discussion, how the rich get richer, and how the rich will have the advantage in the fights. Basically, obviously, like, say a year or two after God Wars Dungeon has been added to old school RuneScape, obviously there will be a lot more AGSs in the game compared to the first month, and pretty much every other item from God Wars Dungeon, meaning that the prices on all of those items will have dropped, and it means that people with mediocre banks and people with more average banks will be able to afford them, and the availability of that weapon will spread. It was pretty much the same with the whips in this game too, and because those things are amazing, and still very little people are using those in the wild, simply because of the cost of them. And money is, I don't want to say hard to make, but just obviously the game's only been out for a month, so not everybody is a Bodhi that plays like for like 20 hours a day or something, and there are a lot more casual players than hardcore players right now on casual. You know, they're not all Alkins and Bodhis, so you know, a lot of those people will be able to afford whips down the road, and whips are kind of like, they're kind of like the OP'd weapon right now, because not a decent amount of people are starting to get 85 Slayer, but you know, not that many, and not that many people have 70 attacks. So you know, the price isn't necessarily going to go down, I would say, on the whip. It could potentially go up, it could go down. I'm not the best at predicting market prices. I never was a good merchanter, but I feel with the whole rich get richer thing is the same concept with the whip, because obviously people out in the wild with a whip right now are just tearing through people with only 60 attack and using a D-skim, and basically the whips will obviously drop, the Armadillo God Swords will eventually drop, and pretty much Dragon will obviously drop, barrels will drop. It's just inevitable. So you know, yeah, if you're rich, you will be able to use that stuff a lot quicker than the rest of the game will be able to use it, but it's not in such a way that the AGS will permanently stay like 100 mil plus and only the rich will be able to use it. It will eventually be able to spread to the more average players throughout RuneScape. And if the game lasts, old school RuneScape, I should say, lasts as long as we all hope it does, then eventually, you know, whips will go down to the price they are in EOC, and it'll be just pretty much a welfare weapon. And AGS will probably stay kind of high, but it will eventually go down pretty low, and that's pretty much how I feel about that.
Right. I think the item prices are definitely going to drop. There's no question, but the problem really comes down to, like I said before, you're going to have a situation where there's very small amount of people that are able to get the items. So while right now there's very small amount of people able to get whips because of 85 Slayer, 85 Slayer is not as big as a challenge, I would say, as being able to do God Wars Dungeon consistently. Obviously, whips are going to take a very long time. Slayer takes a while to level, but a Zerker getting 85 Slayer is not unrealistic at all. Whereas a Zerker being able to farm God Wars Dungeon for, you know, God Sword drops effectively is going to be a much lower chance that that's going to happen. So you're going to get to a point where obviously the prices are going to drop, but it's going to be a long, arduous, grueling process of the items slowly dropping as the handful of people that can do God Wars Dungeon are doing it, while the rest of the game sort of essentially just sits and waits for the high level people to get that done. So I think obviously the items are going to drop. It's going to get to the point where more people have it available to them. But I mean, even think about RuneScape in, let's say, I think 2011 I played a little bit, and there was a point where I think AGS was sitting around 20 mil to 25 mil. Now, when you consider the difference between, let's say, the one of the best spec weapons right now, either a DDS or Granite Maul. Granite Maul is probably going to settle around 200k soon, maybe a little higher or lower. And a DDS, obviously, around 60k, 30k for the weapon and 30k for the poison. The difference between 60 to 200k is drastically different than 25 mil. And I know a lot of people that, although 25 mil, you know, it really isn't that much. And obviously we're talking about down the road after God Wars Dungeon's released. It's going to be 100 plus mil probably when it's first released, especially if we release it in a few months when the economy has more money in it. It's going to get to the point where even if it's down to 25 mil, it's 25 mil versus 60k. And the people that's a really big difference for the people who are having troubles affording being able to PK and trying to have the best game experience they can while still not trying to have the game suck out their life where they're having to money grind and get an AGS just so that they could be on an equal playing field. And so I think that's another real problem that could happen. Another thing, you said that you wouldn't be opposed to a new minigame, but that it would take a lot of time, obviously, from Jagex. And I completely agree, but as of right now, they've already said that they'd have to redo God Wars Dungeon if we wanted it, because obviously this is the latest version of the game that they have saved. So in that situation, if they're going to be spending time redeveloping God Wars Dungeon anyway, I would say that might be a little better spent through a different venture that more of the community agrees with. And here really gets to the point, you said at one point you want to create the perfect game, not necessarily 2007-scape exactly as it was, but the perfect game that we all want and enjoy. And I think the problem with that is that while I agree to some extent that obviously we all want the perfect game, I'm sad to say that there's going to be no votes that pass, especially with the 75% requirement, that are going to change the game drastically. I'm saying right now, if you look at all the polls in the past, even the not controversial ones, I mean, moving the map around or the camera around with your mouse wheel, that hasn't even passed. To expect something as game-changing as, say, God Wars Dungeon to pass, I mean, we could have a vote on it, sure, but I think the chances of it not passing are extreme. And similar to the Addy gloves with the peers, I mean, that was a very small thing for the most part. And while I voted no, that was a very small thing that wouldn't have changed the game to a too drastic extent. And I acknowledge that, and I didn't necessarily vote on that thinking, oh gosh, this is the biggest change. I would quit if this was implemented. But that shows that the game, it seems, at least as of now, that most people want it to stay as it is. And so I think introducing any vote, we can go ahead and do that. I'm obviously all for it, but there's going to have to be a twist on it. Because as of right now, the community really doesn't seem to want change. And so maybe further down the road, that'll change when we're at the point where it's been a year and people start getting bored. You know, all their mains have 85 Slayer and they've been camping whips for months. But as of now, there's really no high-end game-changing content that's being voted and given the okay. And so I think for that reason, we're going to have to sort of think about different ways in which more people would be acceptable for allowing the change, such as, for example, the question that was on the first poll to allow free-to-play worlds, that was then clarified in the second poll. I think that was an important distinction because it failed in the first part, but then as people started realizing what exactly it entailed, it actually passed. And so I think it's important as we go on that we're trying to sort of change the way we look at things. So when we say implement God Wars Dungeon as it was August 27th, I believe, which is not very long after August 10th, which is 2007-scape, but re-implement God Wars Dungeon back to exactly it was, you're going to get, I would say as of right now, this is just a guess, less than 50% votes. That obviously can change down the road, but I would say if you're going to have the poll now, it would be less than 50%. But with a simple change, I mean, saying these weapons, the new weapons and armor won't be allowed in the wilderness, you'll probably get another 10% on yes. You say, the bosses will remain hard and only the weapons and armor, although rewarding, maybe they can give you money as well, rather than just gear that can only be used on bosses. You're going to get an even higher yes. And so I think we sort of have to look at God Wars Dungeon, the implementation of it, a bit differently than simply putting it back in the game as it was and expecting it to thrive. And for those reasons, I would be sort of abject to allowing God Wars Dungeon. Another point that I think I just want to touch on is adding a new place for people to train range in the God Wars Dungeon. And I think that is actually my favorite argument for adding the God Wars Dungeon. I think adding a new place to train range, especially with the profit that could be created from the Avances, I believe that's how you pronounce it. The profit from that is going to be extremely good. It's a great place to train range. A lot of people got 99 range there who didn't want to chin. And I think that's one of the best arguments for God Wars Dungeon. But then that just begs the question, is it God Wars Dungeon that we want, or is it a better place to train range? I mean, all of these questions, it seems to be the point where there's obviously certain things that we want as a community, but I think there's different ways that we can approach it as to not allow for what so many people are afraid of, which is going back to the way that the game slowly deteriorated after around, I would say, maybe God Wars Dungeon, GE, and End of the Wilderness. Those all happening in sort of 1 year is an extreme prospect to look back on. But I think those are the things that really scare people, especially the people that used to play back in 2007, because that's when we sort of watched a game that we loved start to deteriorate around us. And so the point I'd like to leave on is that creating this new range training place as well. I just wanted to say briefly that the biggest drop that you get from those are Addy bars, and I think that with adding the Addy bar drops and the certain drops from higher level PVM, obviously the God Wars dungeon bosses drop a lot of items that aren't necessarily God Wars armor or weapons. All of those items would affect the economy. For instance, with the Addy bars coming from Avances, having the incentive to grind your mining and smithing up to make Addy is going to be a lot lower. And so there's certain things that we need to consider with the market as well when we consider implementing God Wars Dungeon, not just in the case of the new things that are going to be implemented, but also the old items that are going to be basically achieved in bulk, because those drops were much better than any other drops seen before in PVM in this game.
Okay, so going back to how you mentioned that mains will basically be able to farm, I guess I should say, the God Wars dungeon a lot better than Zerker peers. While that is true, it isn't impossible for, obviously, Zerkers can go in with a team of 5, but I think we're kind of forgetting about the mass events too. Basically, where like even one defense peers can even go in there if it's a mass event. I mean, it just pretty much makes it that so that everybody can go in and enjoy God Wars Dungeon and farm for a while. And although those mass events don't happen like every single day, I do realize, but if it is the case that, like, if people do realize that most people are pures and there are very little mains, that could just become, like someone could eventually form a group or a clan, I guess I should say, of pures or Zerker pures or just any type of account in general, and just basically mass the God Wars dungeon so that, Zerker pures could camp God Wars dungeon and bring in the weapons and armor a little bit faster than if we were to only rely on the mains to do that for us. And the reason a lot of people come on here to solely PK is because everybody misses the old combat system on old school RuneScape, and EOC. You could pretty much say that the wild is dead. Just there's way too many flaws, and from what I've heard, there's way too many flaws in the whole combat system on EOC, and the wild is dead. And everybody's favorite PKing was on 2007 Scape, old school RuneScape. And another reason why I feel like there are very little mains in this game is because obviously if you make a main account, then that is going to take the most amount of time to basically max out compared to a pure, where you can just simply work on it for maybe a month or two. I'm almost done questing my Zerker pure within the first month here, and then I'll be pretty much set to go. Maybe a little bit of training, a little bit of money making. Everybody has to do that. Basically, for the people that in EOC RuneScape and continued playing, they worked on their main accounts, and potentially they might have even got maxed out. And they just, with adding this into the game, people just simply don't want to redo that again. And I think that's another reason why people aren't making mains, is not just simply because the small amount of PVM content, is just because they don't want to do it again. And I agree that will make the items implemented a little bit slower than what they were back in the day. when God Wars Dungeon was introduced. And also, too, I'm not exactly sure. There might be less people playing now, too, than there were back in actual 2007. I can't remember the actual numbers of people that were online at one time. I remember it was quite high back in the day, so that might have helped, too. And, there might be new players coming in. We can only hope. That would obviously extend the life of old school RuneScape and its whole. So I basically think that, obviously I don't think the weapons, I've said before, I don't think they affect PKing in a negative way. And with the majority vote thing, I do agree right now that if the poll was to come out within the next month, maybe we should say, I do agree that we definitely wouldn't achieve the 75% yes vote, and it kind of sucks, from my point of view, since I would be voting yes for that. But I do agree with what you're saying, that we wouldn't get 75% vote yes, which is what you need to pass right now in the game, simply because people aren't bored. Now, I do want it in the game, but I also don't want it right now. I think trying to hurry up and add it right now would almost be a bad thing. They could go ahead and release the content poll right now and just see how many people would want it, but maybe just wait about 6 months to a year down the road, I think would be the most optimal time to bring up the poll, or even bring it up for the vote. I think then more people would have their accounts finished, more people would have money and the items they want, and simply they would just want more to do, and the game would get boring. And I think that would be the best time to do it. But they could go ahead and try. I would like to see them try and implement it now, sooner. It would be cool, but I think the best time would be down the road. So like I've said before, I don't really have a certain preference on when they should try and add it. I just think they should add it eventually, is what I'm saying. I don't really care when. I still haven't even gone to a single boss once, so adding it right now, it wouldn't really change my gameplay at all, because I'm still working on my account, obviously, and it wouldn't really affect me at all. So I don't really care as to when they try and add it. I just hope they eventually do try and add it, and whether it's within the next couple weeks or within the next year, I don't really care. And moving on to the whole Addy bars thing, it is a good place to train range. I agree. For Addy bars, it is a very excellent moneymaker. I remember doing it myself, and it's if you're a good grinder and can sit there, you will definitely make a lot of bank from training your range up, especially if you get 99. That's just an insane way to make money, and it definitely would. It does kind of suck in a way that it would make Addy bars definitely the next to iron bars. Iron and steel are probably definitely the most common right now. If a lot of people came to those, then Addy would be I don't want to say first, but probably close running for second, maybe third most bars in the game compared to the rest. Mithril would be kind of down, and Rune is never in very big supply, just because of this simply how long you have to wait for the Rune rocks to respawn. And I guess the incentive to get smithing up would be lowered from having that many Addy bars in the game, but I don't think that's necessarily a negative thing, because as of right now in the game, adamant is kind of there's really no, I don't want to say there's no use for it, but nobody's really going for it. The only time Addy was ever really useful was after Turmoil was added into the game, which was maybe a year or two before EOC was released, and people were making Turmoil Piers, and they would stay at 30 defense, because I think it was 28 or 29 was the lowest defense you could have, and have Turmoil on. So I think lowering the incentive for smithing, at least for smithing adamant, it's not really going to affect the game that much, because if people are getting their smithing high, they're definitely going to be going for the rune items, definitely, because then I know as of right now you can definitely make money with rune items, and I'm sure for a while rune items will definitely be making a profit, because it does take a while, because you do have to have 99 smithing to make every single piece of rune armor, and that is quite a big goal to go after. And so I think with the whole implementation of addy bars won't negatively, I don't think it'll really negatively affect the whole smithing skill as a whole, because people are still going to train it for quests, and people are still going to train it for a completionist sense, I guess I could say, for the skillers and just the people that want to eventually max out every single skill on the game, which is crazy to think about right now. But I don't think it'll affect smithing in a very negative way. It'll basically make training smithing a little bit easier, to be honest, if addy bars are in that much of a supply, because then people, if they actually have the money to, they can choose to make adamant plate bodies, would be a very efficient way to definitely train smithing. Although it would definitely have quite a high requirement for a very big bank. It would still be possible, and I think it would be almost a positive way in that sense. And people could potentially use those adamant items to you could almost alch those adamant items, and they would almost be taken out of the game. And so potentially it could even itself out. If people have a vast quantity of adamant items, they could go and sell them, and then potentially they could be a good item to alch. I'm not exactly sure the high alchemy value of any of the adamant items, but I think that would almost be a good thing, because then, potentially adamant might not get too big in the game, but it definitely would become a little bit more bigger of supply than the rest of the armors. And yeah, moving on to another thing I wanted to talk about is the Slayer items. I've seen a lot of people were complaining the reason why they want to say no to God War's Dungeon is definitely a lot of the Slayers that actually have gotten, I think it's 80 Slayer for Necreals to get rune boots, and 85 Slayer for the whips, is a lot of people think that God War's Dungeon will crash the Slayer items, and to those people I say no, it won't, simply because like we've mentioned before, most of the game is definitely either 45 defense or lower at this point, and so rune boots will definitely always be in high demand, and 80 Slayer is definitely something that is not very common, and it probably never will be too common, because it is quite, even to just 80 Slayer, it is quite a grind, definitely, to get that. And it's going to take a while if you're not using like the most efficient way with Black Mask and prayer potions and prayer armor. If you're having to constantly bank and you don't have NPC contact, that is a very big grind to even just 80 Slayer. So I feel like those things will be still, the whips and rune boots will still be rare enough to have some value. Even a year down the road, they will still have some value, and the demand for rune boots will still be very high, since most people are creating PKing accounts, and I know a lot of people are making Zerker Pures, and the people that are 1 defense right now are eventually planning on going Zerker like a little bit down the road whenever they get bored with 1 defense. So I feel rune boots, like dragon boots from the spiritual mages, will not crash rune boots in a sense, just simply because there's not that many people with 60 plus defense right now, and the demand will simply, I feel, from what I've noticed, I feel that the demand for rune boots will be higher than the dragon boots, and obviously the dragon boots will have a very high value simply because they will be a new item into the game, and that's a new item to take over the rune boots. If you don't want to farm rune boots, you need 83 Slayer, I believe it is, for killing spiritual mages, and for those high level Slayers out there, that's another Slayer, high level Slayer only item that they could go farm if they don't want to farm Necreals or Gargoyles or Abyssal Demons. So in a sense, it'd be giving them another really good thing to farm for, because they're obviously, as we all have seen in the past, anytime a brand new item comes into RuneScape, people pay insane amounts of money for just to get like the first pair in the game, and even like the first 100 pairs. Those people that have 83 Slayer or above will be able to farm those, and it will definitely benefit them because they will be able to make the money that they wanted to make from training Slayer, since that's pretty much the whole purpose they train Slayer, is to definitely get their net wealth up very high. And with the whips will ultimately be the very best weapon in the game. They're just overall the best. We've seen it before. God Swords didn't kill the whip. The Saradomin sword did not kill the whip, even though it did become the best strength training weapon. It's not that much better than the D-Skimmy, because it's a two-handed weapon, and the D-Skimmy you can use a Rune Defender, so the D-Skimmy is kind of close to it, but the Saradomin sword is a little bit better, but it's not insanely better. It maybe will increase your experience per hour by 10k experience per hour at max. It's not a complete game changer like the Chaotic Rapier was or anything. And so I feel the demand for the whip will always be very high. The whip is always, even for years to come down the road, the whip was always a very sought after weapon till like 2009, 2010. The whip was probably pretty much any time before Dungeoneering came out. From what I can remember, the whip was overall, I would say, most consistently the best weapon to have in the game for just in general overall use, for whether it be for training, whether it be for PvP, whether it be for PvM. I feel like the whip is still going to be the overall best weapon. God Swords won't kill it, nothing will kill it, so the demand for that will always stay high. And I don't think that any of the high level Slayer items will be crashed from God Wars Dungeon.
All right, well, to briefly touch on the aspect of you saying the AGS isn't that overpowered, I completely agree that that the AGS wouldn't necessarily ruin the wilderness. Obviously wouldn't take whips out of the game. Whips have their huge benefit of being one-handed and of being the fastest attacking speed. And so whips will not go away from the game. But the thing that I worry about most about the AGS, not prodding, not rushing with the specs and trying to get people down really quickly, it's the simple fact that no one can disagree that the AGS is a better specking weapon, a more consistent specking weapon than the DDS. And when you take that into account and you think about historically how high the AGS has been in price comparatively to DDSs and other things, that's a huge problem when we run up against the fact that there's a huge difference in players. There's the casual players who simply just want to be able to go out and PK, have their fun, then log out after a few hours. And then there's the people who are willing to grind. And I think 2007scape as it is right now is sort of the perfect balance for both of those kind of players. The people who want to grind can go out and do some really high-level content. You can go out and do, KQ and DKs are some serious money at the moment, and I don't think they'll ever really go down to the point where it's like a waste of time to do KQ and DKs. And so for that reason, I think it's not so much that the AGS is overpowered, but it's the price difference mostly between the two. I don't want to give any player, because I think my overall philosophy, while yours is not necessarily keep 2007 the way it was, mine is more of try to keep 2007's balance as close to it can be, because I think a lot of people would agree with me when I say that this is one of the most balanced times that RuneScape really sees throughout its history, in the sense that you have some really good high level spec weapons, which are obviously going to be intrinsically expensive because of their requirements to get, but they're not so overpowered to the point where a DDS versus a dark bow, though that fight is going to be relatively close. You couldn't really call that either way, especially if the strength level was realistically close to the range level. And when you introduce AGS, you widen that gap and you create it so that more people have an overpowered experience, and it's especially the rich people who are able to take advantage of that. So yeah, going just to make that point clear, I don't think the AGS is necessarily that overpowered, and it definitely wouldn't get rid of the whip. For the Addy bar thing, another really brief tangent. The Addy bars, obviously, it's not necessarily that I'm saying like, oh, you won't want to smith anymore because of the Addy bars. It takes away one of the best things about not having a grand exchange, in my opinion, is go out for the things you want. For instance, I needed a bunch of gold bars because I had gems lying around, and I decided, hey, why not make some Rings of Dueling and some Games necklace. Now, while I could sit around in World 2 waiting for some gold bars, think about an item that's more rare, that isn't typically sold in World 2. Those items you have to go get for yourself. And in those situations, I think it's really interesting for the game to have a sense of you have to go around the game. You have to travel to the different places to get the different things. And it's not, you can't live your life in the Grand Exchange. There's so many people, once the Grand Exchange came out, that sort of just lived right there, right in Northern Varrock, just sort of chilled there for almost their entire RuneScape career. And I think to bring this back to Addy bars is that Addy bars, as of right now, if you're trying to level your smithing, and Addy bars are the best way to level smithing from 88 to 99. Addy plate bodies give the best experience for the money. And so when you're out trying to do that and you're trying to get that goal done, I think a lot of people sort of treasure the fact that was one of the hardest requirements back in the day, one of the hardest skills to train. Smithing was something that was arduous and took so much time. And I think it would sort of belittle the experience of those people to implement something which would so drastically change. I mean, when you consider how many Addy bars are going to be added when Avanshees come out, it's going to be ridiculous. There's going to be so many Addy bars, and you agreed with me, and I completely acknowledge that. And I think it's going to be to the point where smithing it's going to sort of ruin the ability for smithing to be that hard skill to train. And I think that's one of the best things about 07 is that a lot of the skills haven't had the EOC power-up of being able to get 300,000 experience per hour in certain skills. And I think it's important to sort of keep the integrity of the slow leveling skills, because I know a lot of people were angry throughout RuneScape's history whenever changes are implemented to increase the experience of certain skills that weren't in the game when they leveled their skill. If you get 99 smithing, going out getting your own Addy bars, or scraping by barely, paying huge amounts for Addy bars because there's so little of them, you're going to feel like you got cheated once they implement God Wars Dungeon and all of a sudden Addy bars are all over the place because no one can even smith with them. You're going to have everyone selling their Addy bar drops, and only a few people who are going for 99 smithing are going to be able to buy them. And so I think it sort of belittles the experience of smithing, and that's my biggest point with the Addy bars specifically. And I think that adds to everything, all the drops in God Wars Dungeons. There's a lot of super restores and stuff that drop from the bosses, and those are the kind of things that although super restores obviously wouldn't crash the market completely, and usually you'll use those super restores on fighting the boss itself over and over again. It's just those kind of drops we need to be suspicious of when we think about implementing them. And the last part about Slayer, I do agree that Slayer items will always keep their price. Obviously, rune boots are going to be high in demand because this server is, like I said, based on pures, and the amount of Zerker pures is definitely commendable, and there's no way that rune boots are going to go down because of that. And same with the whip. As I said before, the whip is something that's definitely going to stay. But I think the important part is to realize that it sort of ruins the incentive to slay. If you're, as of right now, let's say on my range tank, I'm thinking of all the ways I can make money. Now, while I have a lot of ideas, farming for Renars, for prayer potions, I have a lot of ideas in my sort of repertoire, there's a problem when it comes to deciding if I want to level Slayer, because as of right now, I would really love to level Slayer, and it's something I've been doing to try to get to the point where I could sustain myself off drops. And if we get to the point where God War's Dungeon comes out, I'm considering the hours and hours it takes to get up to 80, 85 Slayer. And I sort of think, what's the point when I could just go do God War's Dungeon and get even more money? And that's sort of the biggest problem with I think with EOC is that there's so many things in the game that are just sort of dead content when you release the higher level stuff. And I think Slayer would be one of those. I mean, the people who have 80, 85 Slayer right now would be really happy because, yeah, the whips wouldn't go down much. Dragon boots or rune boots wouldn't go down much. You obviously need Slayer to get the dragon boots. So all those things are going to be fine and dandy for the people with Slayer. But when it gets to the point where we release God War's Dungeon and you don't have the Slayer yet, you're going to be really having a hard time deciding if you even want to level Slayer. And I think sort of limiting the amount that people can play the game in a sense. I mean, I understand that obviously if you want to do Slayer and it's fun for you, why wouldn't you just keep doing it? But I think it's important that we sort of make sure that every bit of this game has its place. And I think as of right now, the game is actually doing a really good job at that. There's sort of almost everything in this game is being used and being utilized so that people can get money, get experience, all that sort of stuff. There's really no dead content. And when you look at the EOC, dead content is everywhere you look. It's left and right, everywhere. And so I think it's important that we try to make sure that everything has its place. And I think Slayer is one of those things where that's almost, in a sense, a high-level PVM. If you're trying to make sure that you're able to kill 140 Abyssal Demons in one trip, that's not the easiest thing to do. I mean, it'll make sure it'll take some preparation. You got to make sure you prayer flick correctly, and all that sort of stuff. So I think keeping Slayer where it is as a very important both moneymaker and a skill that you can both enjoy and get something out of is really important, and not just making it sort of this thing for, yeah, if you grind it a lot, then yeah, you get some extra money from Slayer, but you really don't need to do it because there's better money-making methods out there. And so that really ends my argument for the Slayer.
Going into your whole Slayer thing, I don't know. I don't think that really, I don't think that God War's Dungeon kind of lowers the incentive to do Slayer. Obviously, for a bit there, just doing the actual bosses itself will be definitely better money depending on your luck and what drops you get compared to Slayer. But the thing is with old school RuneScape, before the implementation of the Smoking Kills quest and the whole Slayer helm and the whole new, basically the whole new Slayer system that came out of that quest is the incentive to do Slayer will still be up there, I feel, because Slayer is definitely one of the most prestigious, if not the most prestigious 99 skill to have in old school RuneScape, simply because the XP rates per hour is so low on that. Between Slayer and farming, I believe as of right now, those still, after a month, nobody has obtained a 99 in either one of those skills. And I think with Slayer being one of those more prestigious skills, I think even with God War's Dungeon in the game, people will still be wanting to do it just so they can have that sort of the sort of bragging rights and go around and wear that cape, Slayer cape, which is really awesome looking. And it's to have spent that much time getting, like, I don't even know what the XP rates are. They're probably like 15k to 20k per hour as of right now. That's what I've been hearing all the top Slayers been getting since there aren't that many cannonable Slayer tasks in the game. There's only about 2, being Dagonoths and Calfights. Those are really the only cannonable tasks. So Slayer is just, it's so slow, and because of that, I don't think God Wars Dungeon will necessarily ruin the skill. Obviously, it means that there are slightly better money making methods out there. Obviously, it all depends on luck. I mean, I've heard of people that have gone 24 hours dry at Bandos and they didn't get a single Bandos drop. Actually, a couple of my friends said that they went that long without a Bandos drop. So it is pretty much luck. And I guess Slayer is more luck too. But I mean, with getting 99 Slayer, you're guaranteed to make money. You're guaranteed to get a lot of profit from 99 Slayer. You're killing a lot of monsters leveling that skill up, and I really don't think God Wars Dungeon. I don't think that it would ruin the skill simply because there are better money making methods out there. I think just the fact that it is definitely one of the hardest skills to get 99 in old school RuneScape would simply keep people interested in training the skill. I guess I should say, and I guess that pretty much ends my argument with the whole Slayer thing.
Right, and I do agree with you that it obviously wouldn't kill out Slayer, but the argument that I'm more making is that Slayer, almost in a sense right now, is the form of our God Wars dungeon in the sense that you're spending a lot of time killing monsters to try to get the drops, and some of the best drops in the game. And I think there's no reason to not keep it that way. It obviously, you can almost think of Slayer as the PVM the PVM level in this game, because really all the other PVM choices are tough, but they're not to the extent of what you really want when you're PVMing, which is really good drops and to get good money. And so I do agree with you that it obviously wouldn't destroy Slayer, but I do think it's important to consider the effects that it would have, especially on people who wouldn't otherwise train Slayer if there was a much better money making method out there. And so I think that's a somewhat important part to consider. Now, in your video, you raised the point of giving purpose to treasure trail items when you for the God Wars dungeon, and that is true that it would give a purpose. And I know that you probably think this is one of the less important aspects of why to introduce God Wars dungeon, but in a sense, like, I'm just kind of confused in how, I mean, there's rarely any treasure trails items that I even used when I would do God Wars Dungeon. I mean, really, all you would use is, you'd use some Zamrock arrows for when you were going to Zamrock. And there's certain things you would use, but for, Addy or, Guthix plate body and Zammy plate body, I don't think those are really going to be used. And I think the treasure trail items sort of already kind of have their purpose as being the quasi-rares of 2007scape. And I think that it wouldn't necessarily affect the treasure trails items that much. And I understand that that's probably not one of your big points in trying to introduce God Wars Dungeon, but I do think it's an interesting one, definitely because there's so many items in those treasure trails that are kind of completely worthless right now. So I do think it might be somewhat good to give them a purpose. But like I said, they wouldn't really be used anyway. There's much better choices than his Guthix plate body.
I do agree with how God Wars Dungeon won't make those treasure trail items and just it won't really break them out of their shell of what place they have right now. Obviously, a lot of those, like you said, are completely useless. But as of right now in the game, if you don't want to get piled, I don't think it says. I'm not exactly sure if the God arrows are in the game at this point. I don't think they are. I think they were introduced later in the game, so that makes it a little bit harder. I know for bandits, just using a single Ceradomin or Zamorak arrow was pretty much the best way to go about training at bandits, because then you wouldn't have to waste basically an armor or weapon slot on a pretty much useless treasure trails item. So with the amount of items in the game right now, I feel like some of them would be a little bit more helpful, especially if you are a Zerker Pure trying to go do God Wars Dungeon. If you get piled, it's definitely going to be a lot more threatening, life-threatening to you compared to maybe like a 99 defense main who can just walk in there no problem and not have to worry about it. So I feel like obviously not all the treasure trail items would be good, but maybe if you are a Zerker Pure, then maybe some of the God rune items, such as what you mentioned, the Zamorak plate body, would actually help, because the Zamorak, or the rune plate body itself does have a higher defensive bonus than the fighter torso, and if you lose a rune plate body or Zamorak plate body, people don't really care about that as much compared to losing a fighter torso, so people probably would be more inclined to use that when going into a dangerous area such as God Wars Dungeon. I know I would hate to lose my fighter torso down there and knowing that I can't get back in time to retrieve it. And so I think that's maybe not all of the God items would be handy, but maybe ones such as like the Vamp braces I know people used to use to keep monsters off of them would definitely help. And the God the God armors such as the legs or the plate body, and the treasure trail items will never they will never really serve as much of a part in the game, I guess I could say, until they do actually implement real free-to-play servers in the game that people don't have to pay membership to play, because that is probably one of the main reasons why a lot of those treasure trail items stayed so high in price. I remember just the Zamorak or Ceradoan plate body alone was worth like $1 million, and I think right now they're worth a decent amount, but I don't think they're worth quite as much as that, because members don't really have as much use for them. But in free-to-play servers, the best they could obviously wear was rune, and it was more of a prestigious thing, such as like the discontinued items and rares. It was more of just a thing to show off wealth, and those were one of the few things that were only obtainable in a member server that could be used in a free-to-play server. And so obviously the price and the usefulness on those treasure trail items won't be increased by that much by the God Wars dungeon, but I still think it kind of does it does give them a little bit more of a purpose in the game rather than just cosmetic looks. And so without actual free-to-play servers, I don't think they will ever be quite at the point of usefulness as they once were. But obviously, like I just said, God Wars does help with that fact a little bit more for the lower defense leveled accounts, which is pretty much what we've both agreed on is making up the majority of this game right now. It could help them if they so chose to go down and try and attempt to kill a boss, whichever boss that may be. It could help, like myself. I know I would end up having to waste half of my inventory of food if I got piled by all those monsters down there before I even made it to the boss room, and that would be very detrimental to my trip. So those would definitely help a person out such as myself if I wanted to go do God Wars Dungeon on my account now with the stats that it has right now. And that's pretty much all I had to say about the treasure trail items.
Right. Yeah, I do accept that point. And I think, it's really trivial whether or not the treasure trail items really even affect the God Wars Dungeon. Because, even the piling point that you talked about when you go down, it really all it takes is praying melee and running up to the room, and you'll only be hit by rangers and mages, which definitely wouldn't take you down instantly or anything. So that's not as big as a thing. But I do agree that the treasure trails items would see a significantly bigger role to play. But yeah, as you said, I totally agree that if free-to-play worlds were released, that's where the real treasure trail items come into account. That's where it really starts to rise in price. So I think at this point we've really touched on almost everything. The last sort of things that I just briefly wanted to talk about was the idea of if you've already started your account, and as most of us have, we've planned sort of the way that we're going to go through, what we're going to train. Both of my accounts right now are sitting at 60 attack. My one defense peer is probably going to sit there indefinitely, and my range tank will probably sit there indefinitely too. And that's really where the main part of my question comes in. Let's say on my range tank, I've been a bit more ambitious in the past couple weeks, and I was, let's say, 78 strength and 60 attack. Now, as a range tank, I don't want to become melee based. I don't want to have it to the point where my attack and strength are giving me my combat level. I want my range to determine my combat level. And for that reason, I'm making sure that my strength stays below a certain threshold before it starts leveling me and I'm no longer range based, I'm melee based. And for people who, let's say I was a bit more ambitious and I had that 78 strength, if God Wars was released, I would feel extremely pressured to get up my attack so that I could then use an AGS. And at that point, the plan that I had created for my account sort of really goes to dust. And I think that's one of my biggest problems with implementing God Wars Dungeon is that we've all at this point really made our plans for the way that we want to play this game. We've decided based on what's in the game and not. Some of us to a better extent than others, cough, cough, people who thought they'd get Addy gloves. And we've planned our accounts to the point where if there's anything this game changing, this can ruin a lot of people's accounts that they've made. For instance, my account is very close to being ruined if we were to release God Wars Dungeon. And I'm almost at the point now that this is becoming a debate, it's sort of making me worry. Do I plan for God Wars being put into account? Do I not plan? Maybe there's something else that comes down the road that I'll need to change my stats around for. And I think because this is such a PK driven community, it's really important that we respect the idea that everyone knows where they want to be with their account at this stage in the game. And the more we play with it and change it, allow for Addy gloves, allow for God Wars, all these little changes are really going to affect the way that people have planned their accounts. And I would not want anyone having to start over their account, not because they accidentally leveled their defense or because they accidentally did something, but because the majority of other players want something in the game, and therefore they are forced to change their account. Because as I said, no one wants to have a subpar account. Everyone wants to have the closest to perfect as possible. And so I think that's a huge argument going against implementing anything game-changing, because it really affects the way that people have been training their accounts in the past. And I wouldn't want anyone's time to go to waste, especially because we've all started over already. And so starting over again would just sort of put the nail in the coffin. So I wanted to know what you'd think about that.
I guess I don't have too much to say about that, except I guess the way I feel about God Wars Dungeon and any other update that could be added to the game that could like make the way people planned out their accounts almost I don't want to say make their accounts ruined, but I just don't feel that God Wars would necessarily completely ruin the accounts, I guess, and how you planned it out. Because simply for me with my account, the only difference that I would have to be is whether or not I want to train my attack to 75 or not, and that's pretty much the only thing for me. I guess that's kind of the benefits of having a Zerker peer. But in your case with a range tank, I guess I could see how it could possibly affect that. But if you're, I guess the way I feel, and you know, like I've mentioned to you before, I'm not an expert on range tanks. I've never made one myself, so I'm not exactly sure what kind of preparation and planning goes into making one of those accounts. But I feel if you are a range tank, then if it is a melee based update, then I feel like it would, I don't see, I guess I can't really grasp how it would affect the planning out and preparation of your account that much, since I guess you would be solely using range to PK with, I'm assuming. I guess you could try and hybrid and throw in melee in there, but I'm guessing that you're mainly focusing on range, which you do have a wide variety of things to use to kill people with, like such as the dark bow and Dragon Bolt's E, and there's plenty of other things I'm sure that you could use to try and PK people. So I guess God Wars Dungeon, since it doesn't affect range and mage as much with it, I guess I couldn't really see how it could really affect the outcome of your account, since I guess you wouldn't really be using the AGS as much. But then again, I could be completely wrong. Like I said, I'm not a very big expert on range tanks, but with accounts such as mine, and with one defense accounts that are solely focusing on melee, which is definitely a big majority of the game right now, it would just be a simple change from either 60 or 70 attack to 75 attack. And if your attack has gotten higher than 75 by that point and you were using a whip, then I'm guessing you were planning on eventually just going to 99 anyways. So realistically, once you got 99 strength and your defense level is at what you want, attack isn't really going to affect your account at all, except maybe raise your combat level a couple times. But all it's going to do is just allow you to hit more consistently if you did end up accidentally getting higher than the 75 attack that's required for the God Swords. And I guess that's pretty much how I feel about your whole account planning situation with God Wars being implemented.
Right. Well, as just quickly to push on that, once you were correct when you said once you're 99 strength, your attack really doesn't matter. Because once you're 99 strength, you're melee based at that point, and leveling your attack is simply just going to level your combat, 1 or 2 levels, somewhat negligible. But the point that I was more making is that for a range tank, you don't necessarily have to spec with a range weapon. For instance, if I'm able to get, I think it's 60 attack and 84 strength to 88 strength, somewhere in there, that I can get without making myself melee based. And in that case, a DDS could be a reasonable spec weapon, even if I'm a range tank, in the sense that I could be hitting someone with Dragon Bolts, or I could be hitting someone with knives and switch to a DDS. As opposed to any other range spec weapon. And so the main thing with range tanks is that that's one of the few, because they don't go for 99 strength. If you have 99 strength, your attack level really does not matter that much. You can go up to 75. But if you don't have 99 strength, it does matter, because for every attack level you go up, you're sacrificing a strength level. And so it's really playing with the levels until you get to, I think it's 145 combined attack and strength that you can go to. And you really just have to play with the levels, go up and down. So you're either 75 attack, 70 strength, 75 attack, you move it around like that. And so for range tanks, it sort of is somewhat of a problem. Obviously not too big of a problem, because as you said, it is somewhat true that range tanks attack with range, obviously. But throwing in a melee weapon isn't unheard of, and it can be fun in a lot of circumstances, especially if you're fighting against people who are trying to protect. You can switch over and stuff like that. So that's really the point I was making there. So my last point that I really wanted to ask you about was, do you think, let's say it's a perfect world and we get the 75% yes, and maybe let's say it happens in a year or two, so most people want it. Is that the last thing that you think we should implement, or do you think that sort of every year there should be a new thing to be able to get people interested in the game again so that it doesn't die out?
So saying God Wars Dungeon did get added, and for any future updates, I'm trying to think for any of the future updates that have been added to RuneScape after God Wars Dungeon. I definitely for sure am a big no on the Grand Exchange. I don't want that. Obviously, the whole Wildy, them taking away the Wildy is. We can only hope that's not going to happen. We can only hope Jagex doesn't make the same mistake twice. And pretty much any updates after that, besides new bosses, really, pretty much after that, I do agree. Anytime after God Wars Dungeon, any of the new bosses, definitely, most definitely, all of those items from any of the new bosses after God Wars Dungeon were most definitely overpowered as hell, such as Dragon Claws, the Karazi Sword, which I guess wasn't from a boss, it was from a Grandmaster quest, but still definitely one of the most overpowered weapons to use in pre-EOC RuneScape, and any of the other weapons that I can't really think of off the top of my head. I think God Wars Dungeon should definitely be the last, definitely endgame content update. I'm just speaking endgame, of course. They could obviously, I would definitely be down for some more of the smaller updates. I know there's some that I like, but I can't really think of them off the top of my head. I know a lot
Search and bank.
What?
Search and bank.
Yes, search and bank. That definitely being one. Like simple updates such as that, I would definitely be down for updates to make, I guess, our experience in RuneScape not necessarily too easy, but just simply more convenient. Just to save time, such as the search and bank, the deposit all option, deposit all inventory option, the deposit all of what you're wearing option. Simpler updates such as that, I'm definitely down for, because those definitely updates like that don't ruin the game. They just simply make it more convenient for us, and such as the one you mentioned a while ago, being how you could move the camera with the middle mouse wheel button. I'm very sad to see that that didn't reach the 75% vote yes, and I don't get why people voted no for that. But yeah, I would love to see definitely more content such as that. But as for endgame content, I think God Wars Dungeon is definitely the very last endgame content I would like to see, because after that, I definitely think the game got ruined by all of Jagex's updates and implementation of new weapons and armor.
Right. I the other day I was doing some Slayer, and I had to use the fairy rings to get to where I wanted to go, and it didn't really register with me how annoying it is that they could only move clockwise, and they go one at a time, and there's no bar on the side that tells you where all the locations are. And it's those sort of things, I think you'd agree with that one as well, where it's those sort of things that I totally agree that that stuff should definitely be implemented, because it's obviously not game changing, and that's why I agree that we should definitely keep having these content polls. I've been pretty impressed with the content polls so far. There hasn't been the one that I had the most problem with was the Addy gloves, and that really comes back to my whole philosophy of what we should do with this game. And from my point of view, when I vote on a certain issue, I'm thinking of if it's going to affect the way that we PK, the way that we PVM, and the way that we sort of create our accounts, gear our accounts. And those are the things that I really try to steer away from. I try to make sure that everyone who's decided what they're going to do don't have their entire progress changed simply because of a simple update that happens later on in the game. And we're at an interesting situation, because while you think that God Wars Dungeon should probably be the last content update, endgame, I think that there is a room for endgame content updates, but although this is going to be much more of a task on Jagex, I think there's better ways of going around it than implementing changes to the game that would affect others. I mean, a lot of the reason why we vote yes for certain issues on the RuneScape polls is because it wouldn't affect us. The free-to-play servers for Old School, I probably wouldn't use them. I'm not too interested in having no special attacks and just sort of waiting for auto attacks. That doesn't interest me too much. But of course I voted yes. Why would I say to those people, no, you can't do this because I don't want you to? And that's why I think that there is a way to go about it that I think that we should try to think of better ways that wouldn't affect other people, that would make it so that we can have a better playing experience, but it's not necessarily extremely impacting the others. So my proposition, as I said earlier, of creating a quasi mini game almost, in which almost like dungeoneering. When you really think about it, dungeoneering is pretty much a mini game, not really a skill. Where you would go in, you would fight really challenging bosses, things that PVMers really want. Maybe at the end you get an automatic cash loot so that your time isn't wasted. And I think that's a better way of going around higher level PVM content, higher level content for all the mains, as opposed to reintroducing parts of the game that a lot of people in the community think was the start of the change towards the EOC scape, even if that was far before Evolution of Combat. And so from that point of view, I think there is room for endgame content, but I don't think that God War's Dungeon is necessarily the way to do it from my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I guess I should have clarified, as of right now, what I can think off the top of my head, I don't want any more endgame content, but obviously I can't remember every single update that Jagex has implemented into RuneScape, simply because I haven't played EOC in a good while, so I really can't remember most of the updates. And I guess the way I'm also going about it is my mentality right now is Jagex isn't going to put very much time into tweaking these updates. They might tweak them a little bit, but any major things, I guess, just with I guess it's more of just how Jagex sort of sculpted all of us as players, and how they pretty much went around playing the game, and how we pretty much expect them to be is, as of right now, I really don't have any faith in Jagex actually putting time into making stuff like that. I would hope they would, and if we could make end game content, such as, like you said, that mini game that gives you a cash prize at the end, that sounds like pretty cool, especially for PVMers. And that seems very similar to that one tower in the game where you get the Goliath gloves and stuff from. I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, something like that would be cool, just without the Goliath gloves, because those are really annoying to fight in the wild, and I definitely don't want to see those in the game again. But as you were saying, an actual just cash prize would be a pretty cool thing. Although I guess in a sense it would almost make it kind of I don't want to say boring, but more of a grind than actual PVM, because I think a lot of reason why people are so into PVM is the sense that I don't want to say it's more of a gambling aspect, but just how it's more luck and not just a grind, and how you have the potential to get a dragon chain drop or any sort of the big drops within the first kill. It is possible, and you could make 13 mil or however much the D chain is right now within like a few minutes, and compared to like the grind that you were proposing, I think because then that would you would have to be spending a certain amount of time to make that amount of money, and I think maybe adding some sort of a luck based thing to it as well would almost be a good thing to add to it, because I think that's why a lot of people like boss fighting, is just because of the thrill, I guess I could almost say, of actually getting a really good drop. And the same reason why I love doing clue scrolls. I know in my mind that Third Age is ridiculously rare, but every time I get a level 3 clue scroll, I don't want to drop it, because I always wonder, what if this is the one, what if? And that's definitely what keeps me interested in doing the clue scrolls, is more of the gambling / luck aspect to it all.
Yeah, I think you could add a system similar to the way that Revenants worked, in the sense that there's different cash values on the different statues that are dropped. Just get rid of all the Morgans and all the armors and weapons. But yeah, so I think we're almost in agreement, in the sense that obviously I agree with you that we definitely need endgame content of some sort. Obviously not right now, which we both agree on, because the game is so fresh. There's parts of the game that really haven't been fully explored yet, especially by casual players.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
yeah, so I think that's a point. So I totally agree that there needs to be endgame content, but where I'm really worried, again, is simply where we're affecting the rest of the game in the sense that we voted for 2007. I mean, the biggest thing that I come back to is that if that vote had said, okay, you're all voting for August 27th, 2007, I'm wondering how much that vote would have changed, because I don't want to blanketly say that, oh, those people were just voting for pre-EOC. They don't care about, all the other stuff. Because to say that people don't care about Grand Exchange, to a lot of extent, God Wars Dungeon, I've heard a lot of anger about that. All these different things that were before EOC that a lot of people didn't feel were the best parts of the game when they used to play. And so I think it's important to keep it sort of as close to how we voted, but at the same time allow for people to not get bored from the same 6-year-old game that we're currently playing again.
Yeah, definitely. I really hope Jagex does take old school seriously, and I really hope they realize that they need to start listening to the community. And I'm pretty sure that old school RuneScape right now is a lot more popular than EOC RuneScape, because I know there's a shit ton of bots that are making up the EOC community as a whole, and I feel like that definitely old school is a lot more popular in a sense of real players. And I can only hope that Jagex takes the time to keep doing these content pulls, like you said. And if it would be really awesome to see them make brand new content, almost in a sense, like we so suggested. And it's just obvious to see, even if you go onto Twitch TV, it's already amazing that RuneScape has been maintaining a front page position for this long, a month after. And if you go into the actual RuneScape page on Twitch, you'll see that there's hardly any EOC people watching EOC. So I really hope Jagex is taking that into account and realizes that I hope they do end up putting more people on the support team for old school RuneScape, because I'd really like to see this game last. And I think it's really cool that they're taking the time to very carefully add stuff into the game, and how they're allowing the community to add this sort of thing. And also, one thing I kind of wanted to add is I think a lot of the negativity for God Wars Dungeon is how you mentioned earlier, how God Wars Dungeon, the Grand Exchange, and the taking away of the wilderness all happened in 1 year. And obviously, I feel that only 2 of those things are negative. I think with all of that happening in 1 year, the only reason a lot of people associate God Wars Dungeon to be a negative thing and to be advanced towards EOC is just because it happened like so close to those other 2 things there. And I think that's why a lot of people are kind of given God Wars sort of a negative outlook right now. I just kind of wanted to make that point real quick there.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Well, I think we've pretty much got to the point where we've hit on everything I at least can think of, and we're really down to the point where endgame content needs to happen, but we somewhat disagree on the way that it should happen. And while I concede a lot of your points, I mean, the weapons aren't necessarily too overpowered. It obviously wouldn't ruin the wilderness. I think it's important to pay attention to all the points as we continue. And I really hope that if it gets to the point where people are thinking critically of all these updates, that we can come together as a community and actually vote for the changes, because as it is right now, this game is not going to change for a while, in the simple fact that the 75% threshold that we need is I'm not going to say it's too high, because I agree that it should be much higher than a simple majority to get a change implemented. But it's too high to ask for huge game-changing updates, because those are the kind of things that a lot of people will instantly turn off and say, no, I want this game as it is. I'm having fun right now. So I think it's good that we did this. I'm really happy. I had a great discussion. So I just wanted to thank you for this. This has been really educational.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. This was really awesome, and I'd hope to be doing these sort of discussions for any future updates that Jagex might be thinking about adding.
Certainly, right on. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we taking over the game.